and here's everything you need to know to mentally prepare yourself for your first solo flight. Let go! Boom! The day that you fly a plane solo by yourself is going to be one of the greatest experiences and days in your aviation journey. And regardless of where you go with your pilot journey, many years from that point, you'll always remember the first day that you soloed an airplane by yourself. Everything that you do prior to this point, leading up into that solo, is leading up into this wonderful and beautiful experience. And after you watch this video, you'll mentally know everything that you need to know for you to have a positive and really great first solo experience. Let's get into that thing. Let's go! Hey, the first thing you want to do to have a great first solo experience is trust and embrace the process. And you should be doing this from day one. When you first connect with your flight instructor, you want to make sure you fully embrace and enjoy the process along the way. All the bumps along the road, whether the process is going fast or it's going slow for you. Everybody solos at a different point. Some people solo after just 6 hours. Some people, it may take 60 hours. It doesn't really matter. It just depends. Everybody goes at their own individual pace. So do not get discouraged in any way. Long as you're making progress every time that you're in the cockpit, you're on the right path for that solo experience. So that's numero uno. Next, you want to take into consideration that everything that you've been doing up until this point has been leading to you having a great first solo. All the maneuvers that you're learning, these are not just individual maneuvers that you're doing to check a box on any kind of checklist or sheet so you can move on to the next thing. They're all things that can happen in a solo experience when you're in the pattern, so they're preparing you for it, like engine failure, so you're learning about your emergency procedures, like dealing with your power on and power off stall. Those are the kinds of things that can happen and cause significant problems when you're in the pattern doing your first solo. So if you approach it from that standpoint, as you're learning these different maneuvers leading up into that time that you're going to do your solo, all that is mentally getting you in the right space that you need to be in mentally for that first day that you're going to solo. Boom! So the day has finally come. It's the day of your first solo. You show up at the airport, you're excited, everything is going good, you're doing your natural protocol, your pre-flight, everything is looking beautiful, everything is looking lovely. You hop inside the aircraft with your instructor, and then you're probably going to do a few laps in the pattern together. At this moment in time, you may notice that your instructor is pulling back a little bit. Maybe they're giving you less and less instruction and allowing you to make the proper adjustments and the proper calls that you need to make. When they start pulling back like that, they're giving you the opportunity to be pilot in command because they're setting you up properly for a very nice solo. If everything goes smooth and everything goes right with your instructor in the cockpit, then they're simply just, when you come to that full stop on one of those landings, they'll get out and they'll allow you to take off and land by yourself on your first solo, a moment that you will more than likely never ever forget. And here are a few key things that you want to be aware of so you can have a very positive and great first solo experience. Number one, think about what your instructor is looking for before they allow you to solo. They're not looking at just the day itself that you're going to solo. They're looking at everything cumulative up until that point that you have been going and been training before you even are allowed to solo. Kind of seeing how you're progressing, seeing how comfortable you are, seeing how your confidence is building. They're taking note of these kinds of things. And they're not looking for perfect flying on the day of your solo, because just think about it. You're still in the middle of the process. This is just your first solo. Even after you get your license, you won't be a perfect pilot who only does perfect flying. So they're not expecting you to do perfect flying on the day of your solo. But what they are expecting you to do is to be safe. All about safety in the aircraft. Even after you get your license, even at every point throughout your aviation journey, safety first. For example, are you noticing and recognizing that you're not at the right altitude and able to adjust that safely and quickly, making small adjustments? Or can you notice that maybe that you're not at the right airspeed and you can adjust that quickly and get to the right airspeed? The kind of things that you need to be aware of. Spacing. Are you really good on the radios, making the right calls and noticing the traffic, looking out for traffic, those kinds of things? All about safety. So if you really want to kind of get yourself in a position so you can solo a little bit more quicker in the process and more smooth along, make sure you work on those things and make sure you're always exercising safety first. Being good at flying is great, but being great at always being safe is even better. So making sure you're always exercising that and always doing that, and you'll be in the perfect position on your first solo. Let go! Boom! Here's a key tip that you want to be aware of when you first solo. If the procedure goes just like we just discussed, you do a few laps in the pattern with your instructor, and then when you come to that full stop, your instructor gets out and then allows you, of course, to take off on that first solo flight. Be cognizant of something. Be cognizant of the fact that the weight and balance of the aircraft has just shifted just that quickly. Particularly, just think about if your instructor weighs, just say approximately 200 pounds. 200 pounds that just exited the aircraft. That's going to have a different kind of dynamic on the flight. You're going to notice that maybe when you take off, that maybe the aircraft is a lot lighter and it gets into the air a lot quicker than it was on the last couple laps you went around when your instructor was there. Just think about coming down as well. So just understanding how weight and balance can shift just that quickly. So always be cognizant of that. You still fly the same, you still do the same things. You just may notice the aircraft is a lot lighter because that load is a lot lighter just that quick when your instructor decides to step out. Always be cognizant of your altitudes, your airspeeds, spacing, all that good stuff to make sure you're in a good place, and always practicing and making sure that you're being as safe as possible. Hey, and here's one where you really want to be cognizant of. Never be afraid to go around. Even though it's your first solo and you want to nail it, you want to do everything perfectly great and right, all that's fine and dandy, but don't be afraid because you're trying to impress your instructor or even just impress yourself that you're afraid to just call the go around if necessary. If it doesn't feel right, just go around and set it up again. This is why you're going to be practicing those go arounds long before you get to the solo stage. Always have those things in your queue and in your toolbox and in your arsenal ready to fire at any given time when it doesn't feel right. Hey, the next tip is always be very aware of how the weather can change immediately. For example, let's just say you were doing a couple laps in the pattern with your instructor before they got out and the winds were calm. But then all of a sudden you notice when you take off and you did a wind check, the winds picked up a little bit. So be thinking about that. Always stay ahead of the aircraft and think about how you may have to adjust. Maybe you have to crab into the wind a little bit, or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe there was a light wind when you were with your instructor, but when they got out, now all of a sudden things are nice and calm. One thing about the wind and one thing about weather in general, it can change on a dime, and it can change just as quickly as it takes someone to get out of the aircraft and for you to take off again. So be aware of that, those subtle little changes that you may be aware of. Boom! Next up, you want to make sure you program your mindset to not just be ready for a standard traffic pattern, because anything can happen at any given point in time. And when you exit off on that solo, it can be a situation where all of a sudden you're asked to extend the downwind. You may be asked to abbreviate the base leg or do something different that you didn't do before when you were doing a couple laps in the pattern with your instructor, simply because of traffic, simply because of things that have happened and elements are happening now that weren't happening before. So mentally prepare yourself and be ready for that. Don't let that be a surprise that kind of gets to you, even though of course you're already going to be nervous because you're human and because it's your first solo, but stay ahead of the aircraft and always think about, I may not be the only one in the pattern. All of a sudden, there may be 2 to 3 others in the pattern as well. I may be asked to do certain different things that I wasn't asked to do before when I was in the aircraft with my instructor. So I'm going to mentally stay ahead of the aircraft and be prepared to do those things if I'm asked to do a 360 all of a sudden. If I'm asked to do extend the downwind or head straight to the VOR or do anything in particular that I wasn't asked to do before outside of the standard traffic pattern. Boom! Which leads us to never be afraid to say that you're unable. If you're asked to do something in particularly on that first solo, this is highly unlikely that it would happen to you. But let's just say you were asked to do a short approach for any particular reason. Just because airport suddenly got busy, traffic all of a sudden happened, they forgot that you were a student pilot on your first solo, and they just gave you that kind of instruction. Don't be afraid to say unable, and they can just reroute you to do something different in that scenario. Usually your instructor, ATC, everyone's coordinated, kind of giving you the proper instructions and not going to ask you to do anything that's well outside of the realm of your capabilities at that time, but you never know what can happen at any given time. We're all human, we all make mistakes, anything can happen, but just be prepared for that. And if you're asked to do something that you're unable to do, just simply say unable and you'll be in a good place, in a safe spot. Stay ahead of the aircraft at all times. Let go! Boom! You on your first solo, you coming in nice and easy. You in ground effect, baby. You just riding that thing. You touch down nice and soft, kissing the runway, one time. But remember, your solo flight isn't over until you back in the hangar and the airplane is tied down. Fly it all the way to the hangar. It's very easy to get excited because you did it right and because everything went well, and then you forget you still have to navigate while you're on the ground. So make sure how excited you are, make sure you contain yourself enough to always stay in control of the aircraft and fly it all the way to tie down. Let go! Boom! There's a certain sense of freedom that comes from flying an aircraft for the first time by yourself, solo. I want you to experience that. I want you the best for you and everything for you. Watch the videos on this page to help you get through your pilot journey. Everything that you need to know for you to be swinging and banging that thing. Let go! Don't forget to like this video, comment on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel. I am Donovan Batiste. This is Leadership Mindset, a place where you can come for all the free and fun videos that you need, for everything that you need to know for you to become a pilot. Because I want you to feel what pilots all over the world feel when we swinging and banging that thing. Love you one time. Subscribe to this channel.